All right, guys, welcome back to the show. So today we have Nate with Hinterhaus Distilling, and we're going to go through a couple of their. They were gracious enough to send over some samples, and we're going to go through a couple of those. We're going to talk about their brand. We're going to do all the whiskey things, and yeah, without further ado, here's Nate. How's it going, brother?
I'm good, man. It's I don't even know what day it is, but it's
It's
in the
Thursday.
evening and
It
I'm
is a
done
Thursday.
working for the day. So that's a good thing. Yeah, we're doing good up here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so where do we start? So let's start at the beginning. Where were you born? No, no. I always like to ask this question first, and I don't mean to put you on the spot right away, but why? Why get into what you're into? Is it stemmed from something? Did you have a brewing background and now you're into this, or were you an IT guy and said, "Screw it, I hate that job, and now I want to do, I want to make whiskey." And I know y'all make some other things as well. We'll get into that later, but why? Why do this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Some days I ask myself that frequently. But no, we're new to this industry. My wife, who's the co-founder with me, was in the wine industry before and also did some work in marketing and startups. We're in Northern California, so there's of course the startup culture is strong here.
Right.
And for me, I spent my whole career in employee benefits and human resources at large corporations. So
Okay.
most recently was with Tesla Motors
Okay.
and was there when it was small and just a startup. And then it grew extremely fast to a household name that everybody knows about.
Yeah.
And through that process, this is kind of a long way of getting to why,
It's
but
no, it's fine. Go as deep as you want.
for sure. So through that process of growing with a company and the intensity of the work, and as you can imagine, trying to change the world and all
Yeah.
that good stuff. There were also some personal life events. My father got ill and passed away, and he and I were very close. And so I just knew I needed to step away for a little while.
Right.
And so, like I told my team when I left Tesla Motors. I said, I think I'm just going to walk into the woods for a while. And we had a family cabin in this little town of Arnold, which is a small town. We could talk more about. It's an amazing place in the
Right.
Sierra Mountains, east of sort of the Silicon Valley, Northern California area. And we decided to move up here full time and sort of make a go at it and see what we could do to earn a living. In the meantime, I was still consulting in the business and doing that sort of a thing, but I knew I didn't want to do the travel. I wanted a different kind of lifestyle and a different pace. A bunch of ideas going back to alcohol. I've always loved alcohol, probably earlier on than I should have. Um, but big beer fan. And
Okay.
I tried my hand at home brewing and quickly discovered that I could buy way better beer for a lot less effort than I could make at home. For
Absolutely.
whatever reason, it just didn't click with me. But I got sort of obsessed with understanding more about spirits, and there's more and more information now. But back then, sort of 10 years ago, it wasn't common knowledge how spirits were even made.
Right.
Most people had never been to a distillery, so I just went down the rabbit hole and started learning as much as I could, reading books, visiting places, anywhere that we went. Like you, just trying to learn more about these amazing whiskeys and spirits out in the world. And so we really came at it from a fan perspective. And we could talk about how that's influenced the way we set this thing up. But,
Right.
um, we just went deeper and deeper. And eventually I thought, I think there's a market for this in our little town that would at least support our lifestyle, which is, paying the bills and insurance and food and all that good stuff. So pitched the idea to my wife, and we worked through the process and what would it take and how would we do it and all that good stuff. And ended up signing our lease on the space that we were in and putting some down payment on equipment the week before the nationwide lockdown in March of 2020.
Yeah.
So an interesting time. But yeah, back to the why, I think it's just this exploration, wanting a different lifestyle, but then also wanting to understand more and wanting to, and seeing an opportunity for us to put our mark on it, if you will, just in our local area, and share with others what we had discovered about distilling. And it's been a cool process to see how people react, because it is still very new. As much as you and I are deep in the weeds on whiskey and how it's made,
Right.
the ingredients are, the majority of people who walk into any given distillery on any given day, I would say probably well over half, it's their first experience being
Yeah.
in a distillery. Everybody understands breweries and wineries, but distilling is like, they look at that thing and they're like, what is that? How does, what's it made out of? The questions are, people just don't know. They haven't been exposed to it yet. So it's pretty
Right.
fun to be in so far.
Absolutely, and that's it's a perfect caveat for me, because my day job is a plumber, right? And I was working at a local distillery here in town. They make gins and brandies and eau de vie and stuff like that. And I was working on something. Anyway, I went inside because the guy, and I'm self-employed, so I can do this. He wanted me to try a brandy that he had been barrel aging, which he knows I like barrel aged stuff. And so I tried the smallest of samples of that, and it was really nice. But there was a guy who just walked in off the street, and they were like, "Hey, have you been in before?" "No, never been to a distillery before," like just like you said. And they ran him through a flight of their stuff that they had, and he was blown away. He went into the back, he got to see the still, he got to see all the things, and like then we got to talking, and we got to talking about different things. And he said that his dad was really into whiskey and he wanted to get more into distilled spirit. He drank beer all the time. It's this similar thing. And then I think more and more people are getting into distilled spirits, especially, which is good for both of us, obviously, but it's also good for the distilled spirit industry, because it makes a little bit more of a drive for that. So one of the things I want to do while we're sitting here, I'd like to go through one of these samples, and you tell me which one we can start with, and then you can continue your story.
For sure. I've already poured myself one. So
Okay.
let's start with the one I poured, which is the American Single Malt Whiskey Discovery Batch 2.
Batch 2.
Yep. So the reason I sent you two bottles that would seem like the same product, the American Single Malt Whiskey from Hinterhaus Discovery Series, we call it, Batch 2 and 3, is so that hopefully it'll help guide the discussion on what we're doing with American Single Malt Whiskey, because they are drastically different
Okay. I love that.
presentations. Yep. So this one, and we're geeks about this, so I don't know how your eyesight is, but mine's not very good, so I can't read it off the back of the bottle. But we put down every detail we
Yes,
possibly
I
could
saw
think
that.
somebody would want. And the highlights of this is what we're doing, and as the name indicates, discovery. We're on a journey of discovery of what different malted barleys can do for a whiskey and different barrels can do for a whiskey. So
I love that.
yeah, we've got these basic ingredients, there's water, there's barley, there's a barrel, there's yeast. And again, going back to what most folks know about whiskey, which is not very much, the idea that there's more than one barley or that there's more than one type of corn, or that these things actually impact flavor in a big way is not necessarily commonplace knowledge.
Right.
And in some circles, even real whiskey circles, not even accepted knowledge. Some folks will actively argue that the type of corn does not matter and things like that.
Bull. I say bull to that, because if you've ever had a blue corn whiskey or a Jimmy Red whiskey or any of the other varieties of corn that are out there, other than a commodity number 2 yellow dent corn, you're going to taste a difference. And these are also the same people that say that only bourbon can be made in Bourbon County, Kentucky. So these are the same people we're talking with here. It is very small writing on the back, but it is so cool that you literally put like everything, all the entire mash bill, which is all malt, but then like the cooperage, and there's 2 separate cooperages, and then the casks, and there was ex bourbon, there's that had a first fill wheated whiskey. And it's just so cool that you guys are that transparent. And it even says the age. This one is at least 19 months. Why did you feel pulling it at 19 months? Was it just that it tasted good, or what was your thinking, I guess, behind that?
Yeah. So there's a few reasons for it. I mean, thanks for recognizing the transparency. I think one of the reasons we do it, and on our website, folks can look up every detail we're legally allowed to say. In some cases, if we're sourcing a bourbon, we can't say who the distiller is, just contractually, but we could say where, and you can kind of figure it out. But the main point of that is not necessarily patting ourselves on the back saying we're transparent, but it's more, as a whiskey nerd myself and a fan first, I want to know this information. So I think, there's a small percentage of people who are like me out there who also, who also want to know this information. I think it's fun. And I think it's things we can share, and so we should. To the question of the age, so it's the youngest stuff in there is 19 months. There's a couple reasons for it. One is we're on this discovery of figuring out how do things age in our location. So we're Northern California, very dry climate, where at elevation we have some pretty intense heat swings and cold swings. So we're in an area of the Sierra Nevada that's at about 4,000 feet elevation. We get snow and cold in the wintertime, significant snow, and then it gets hot in the summer. And just even our building, it's fascinating. Our building is kind of where the casks are kept, is kind of nestled in this part of town that doesn't get a lot of sunshine because of the mountains and the trees and just the way it faces. So long way to say, we're just discovering, and when we feel like it tastes good, essentially, is when we pull these casks. And it's
love that.
Yeah, and it's way less about trying to hit a certain age statement and more about the flavor profile we're going for. So in this one, it sounds kind of strange, but one of my favorite scotches is Glenmorangie.
Yes, love it.
I think it's just this very approachable. It doesn't get a lot of fanfare because it's sort of a, I don't know if people consider it lower range or what it is, but for me, it's just this. It really, all the treatments and the cast finishing and all this sort of stuff is stripped away in a Highland like that, and you're really driving straight to let the ingredients, the grain, shine through. So that was the flavor profile we were aiming at with this. And how do we do that? So we're like, we want certain grains that are, local and have a nice forward cereal character. We don't want to overdo it with the casks like you would on a bourbon or a rye. No new charred oak, so we're using X barrels. And then pulling it out when we felt like it hit that sort of marker. And I'm not going to say it's as good. Would never claim anything like that, but but we liked it, and we were like, this is probably as close with this stuff that we're trying to hit that flavor as we're going to get. And we do have some smaller barrels mixed into this batch, so we've got some smaller 25-gallon barrels that we had used. Those X wheat were 25-gallon barrels.
Okay.
And then we threw it in our own X single malt barrels from the first batch.
Oh, okay. That's
And
kind of cool.
yeah, they were new charred American oak barrels
Okay.
on the first batch.
Right.
So it had, the first batch had this really dark characteristic.
Right.
And then sort of, we wanted to do a little bit of touch of that, but not full blown new charred oak. So we kind of finished it in those barrels. And, we've got the luxury of time and being able to mess around with this stuff. And, we're not tied up trying to create 1,000, barrels of the same stuff and all that good thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let me tell you, just from the few small sips that I've had, this thing presents super nice. It presents super flavorful. You're not missing anything. It's a 46% expression, so that's perfect. I get the Glenmorangie feel that you're trying to go for. You get it's a little fruity floral on the taste, on the smell. You get some of the oak, but it's not overpowering. It's more like a vanilla cream. It's not anything that's going to knock you over the head, and it's just super. I'm going to say it. It's super approachable, aka smooth. It's super approachable for anyone who would like an American single malt, which I understand there is two factions or three, I guess. There's three factions in the world. There's the bourbon lovers, bourbon only. There's the single malt guys. I'm only drinking single malt, and then there's me. I love it all. So I'm not picky. But to me, it's a great expression. But it also leaves room for you to, like you're saying, it leaves room for you to grow with it. And I love the simple fact that you said, hey, at 19 months we pulled it because it tasted good. We weren't trying to get it to 2 years so we could put a 2-year age statement on it. And I've had a couple other people come on here, like Dad's Hat from up there. They're like, hey, we do 9-month-old whiskey. It tastes good at 9 months. We pull it off, and that's really cool because there's so many people that are trying to get that 10, 12, 15-year-old age statement. And guess what? Their product is over oaked. It's overly tannic. It kind of falls apart in the barrel, or it gets really high proof and really astringent or something like that. So the fact that you have the wherewithal to just say, hey, no, we're gonna pull it when it's good, and I'm sure, and you can answer this, I'm sure you probably set a barrel aside and said, hey, we'll age that one for a little bit longer and go back and try it and see if maybe at 2 years it is a little better or whatever. But it's all about the discovery, right? And all about the exploration and understanding that. And I really, that means I've tried some single malts that are much older than this that taste much worse than this, worse than this. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah. And that is what this product is all about, is us discovering all these factors about our facility, our process, our ingredients, all of it. We don't know how these things are going to age out. We don't know how much angel share we're going to get in our facility, and those things, folks don't maybe think about it sometimes, but in an area of the country like Texas, where you're at, or Northern California, where we're at, or Arizona or New Mexico, name a dry place. I'm going to argue, if you see a 10-year-old whiskey, they might be lying. Because that barrel is going to be, unless it's temperature controlled or humidity controlled facility, it's going to be damn near empty by the time you get to 10 years. So, and then what has that done for the flavor? I don't know. But yeah, there's also practical aspects here of, losing 5% angel share every year. There would be no 18, 20-year-old Scotch if they had the same climate that we do.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's those things, there's flavor, all of it. And the idea of this product was, one of the reasons we started this distillery is we're super passionate about single malt whiskey. And the way we set it up was to be at our core. We really have three kind of verticals, but one of them that's core to us is making American single malt whiskey. So when we approached this, we said, well, we want to have let's say a house style. We want to have a standard single malt whiskey. Well, how do you know what that is? And we did a bunch of trials, and we continue to experiment, obviously. And somewhere along the way, batch 2, I could have said, hey, this is great. This is going to be our standard recipe, but there's so much more to discover. So really, before we settle in on what our standard presentation is going to be, that's what discovery is all about, trying to work with every malt we can find, trying to, tweak the process, different barrels. And and also it's an education for consumers who might not have thought that different barleys can taste different. And so, introducing them to this range of flavors, and hopefully getting to go out there and try, other folks' stuff too, to realize that there's so many cool flavors that can come just in bourbon or just in rye. It's crazy, the variance.
Yeah, it really is. And that's what I encourage everybody who's listening or going to watch this later. I encourage you, go out there and just try it. Hey, it might suck, but go out there and try it. Everybody has a semi-local distillery somewhere near them. Go to it, see what they have to offer. It might not be your flavor profile, but see what they're trying to achieve and see if it meets, and this is a big word that we use around here, see if it meets the terroir of your area. See if that's what they're trying to do. Or are they just trying to make a commodity product that for the masses, or are they trying to, this is my county, my country, my state, whatever. This is this, and I feel like you guys are trying to do that by showcasing all these different types of barley, both together, and I feel separately, because I feel, and of course, as me getting super nerdy, but I feel like, especially on this one, we haven't dipped into the other one yet, but you can smell that there's different, man, that's going to get real nerdy. Sorry. Different sweetness levels in the nose. Like it starts out like almost cocoa-ish, and then it gives you a little bit of biscuitiness as well. But they're all like sweet smells, which is kind of strange, like a biscuit with honey or whatever. And then it gives you that, just if you've ever just had cereal, or tried malt by itself, malted barley by itself, then you get that smell in there as well. And so I feel, and this might just be me saying that, but I feel like I can smell all three of those coming through, and and I feel like it's the showcase of the different types of barley, which that could just be psychosomatic, or I'm a psycho, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's absolutely right. And I think what we've discovered, our son Keegan is the assistant distiller, and he's got an incredible palate and sense of smell, and he's kind of nailed it, that no matter what we do, especially in the American single malt whiskey coming off of the still, because now we've been laying down quite a few barrels of this stuff, and every time a different malt bill. So, but he's nailed it, that there's a consistent like house character to all of them. And his theory is that it's the still and the water and our process that kind of it has this consistency, even though the flavor range probably for most people, it would be like, okay, they're not that different, or they maybe couldn't even find similarities. But for somebody like him that's tasting it every day, and he can find this thread in there. Maybe it's just 5% that runs true. And the other thing is absolutely the terroir of the grains. So in this case, we're using grains from Admiral Maltings in Alameda, which is near us, and we're very fortunate to have such an amazing craft maltster locally who's growing grains on local family farms and malting them in the old traditional Scottish style of floor malting. And and we've worked with other grains from other folks that are fabulous too, but there's definitely a characteristic from this certain farm, and the certain strain of barley, and the way Admiral malts it. And then also the grains we like to use. One of them is Gallagher's Best, they call it. One of them's Kilnsmith. And the way they're kilning those grains, and there's definitely a character to that we like a lot, and we're trying to carry through as we go through this journey of discovery to finding out what's our standard,
right,
sort of everyday bottle, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But also pushing those boundaries a little bit, just enough to where you're like, hey, this one's a little bit different, but it's because of this. And this one's even more different because of this. And so that's what's super cool about doing this discovery series, if you want to call it that, is the fact that you're not holden to anything. You can basically do whatever you want, whenever you want, because your flagship, everybody needs a flagship, but if your flagship changes, that's even better, because then you're like, I need to get batch 3, 4, 5, and 6 now, because I want to see the flavor differences between. And so that's I know you saw me earlier. That's what I did. I went ahead and opened up batch 3, and this one is a special one, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was a fun one. So we do a lot of work with one of our local brewers. They're called Dust Bowl Brewing. Out here, you can find their stuff everywhere, and they're phenomenal brewers. And it's an amazing facility. And we do a lot of work with them. They do a lot of the washes for us. We work with them on just ideas around grains. They're just really smart and good people. They have a porter called Public Enemy Baltic Porter that they put out every so often. And this porter won gold at the I'm not in the beer industry, so I'm going to get it wrong, but the big brewers conference, it's a big deal. And I love porters. I love dark beers, especially as we're getting into winter here. I want something that's been in a whiskey cask maybe, or something like that.
Right. Absolutely.
And so we were talking to him one day, and I said, that thing would probably make a really good whiskey. The caveat being we have distilled beers, and when there's hops involved, the hops comes through and really does some things to it, good and bad in some cases. And so I said, would you guys be willing to brew that beer exactly the way you do, but just don't add hops to it? And then we'll make this whiskey out of it. So yes was the answer. And so we've got, again, listed on the back is all the details of what the recipe is. It's got some Wireman in it, and some Dingmans, and some black malt, and all kinds of fun things like that. Brought that stuff up to our facility, distilled it, and then we did age this in new charred oak.
Right.
So again, kind of leaning into that dark beer thing. And
right. Yes, absolutely.
The deeper notes. We said, we think that'll be fun. And then it spent some time sort of resting in some ex-bourbon barrels as well after the new charred, because that new charred was really hitting it, and tying in well, but we got a little bit skittish that it might overpower some of what was going on. So we said, let's throw it in some used bourbon barrels and let it kind of marry with that for a little bit. So
absolutely.
Again, the only difference is there. And again, terroir, what do we have available to us? We make bourbon, we have bourbon. And so that means we have used bourbon barrels. And, what are you going to do with them? You're going to use them. I mean, that's just, especially in a world where, oak is hard to come by and barrels are hard to come by. So again, it's that kind of resource thing, and what's around, and there's a brewery, let's work with them. And it just creates, as you said, this kind of terroir and regionality.
And then in turn, they can use the barrels that you aged their beer in, or their beer turned to whiskey in, and age more beer in it. So it's a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the fun thing is they've just launched their own distillery. So they're going to be able to release a portion of this through their distillery as well. So that's been really fun. And they don't brew this beer all the time, but they just brewed another batch of it to be able to have some of it out. So it's kind of fun, for me personally, again, being a beer fan, to get that actual beer that this is made out of and be able to taste the two side by side. And, I don't know about you, but compared to the first one, on this one, I get a lot of those dark kind of charred flavors, and some of it's like almost the good kind of burnt part on toast or something.
Yes. And like it's really, what is it? Burnt marshmallow or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, a lot of burnt marshmallow. I get some almost like cinnamon on top of it, like the I don't know if you ever had like the cinnamon sugar on your toast kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But again, all we're talking about is, a little bit different barrel treatment, different barleys, and so to your point earlier of, people who say that ingredients don't matter, baloney.
Yeah, absolutely. Because putting good ingredients in a barrel or in a still or whatever you're going to do with it. And also we can talk about this as well, but like having a good fermentation, having a good mash, having all those things, it just makes it that much better. It just makes it that much easier to have a good end product if your fermentations are tight and clean, and or unless you want them to be funky. Some people want them to be funky, right? But using a good attainable yeast, all of those things help it with the end product as well. So
yeah, and I will say, all this talk of, and you brought up fermentation, so I completely missed the bus on telling you this part, but we seem like we're these control freaks about everything. Meanwhile, our fermentation is open, uncontrolled fermentation. So we have an 1,800 gallon fermenter that's open top, and it sits in our warehouse. And if the weather's okay, if we can, it's not too cold out or not too hot out, we open the warehouse doors and let everything in. So we really are encouraging. We don't temperature control it. So we're encouraging the most natural fermentation we can, which is a variable and it's funky. And, depending on the time of year, it varies depending on the heat inside and outside, depending on it's influenced by whatever flora and fauna are in the air. We've got pine and cedar trees surrounding the distillery, and they have their own yeasts and stuff on them blowing around. So that's definitely also going to add to seasonality of the batches, but also we feel a unique terroir that we don't even know at this point what that is or how it's being impacted. But down the road, we have an idea that we'll be able to capture some of that and figure out what is it that's contributing to which flavors, from the environment around us. So it's, in some sense, we're trying to control some things, and in another sense, we're saying let's let our area impact us.
Absolutely. And that's what's so cool about it is you're able to do that. You're able to just control what you can and leave the rest up to Mother Nature. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, the nose on this, I'm really digging now that I haven't tasted it in a few weeks, but that nose is like almost like the smell of a cinnamon roll, the sweetness from the frosting on top, and the doughiness, if that's a word.
Right. It is. And this is 46% as well. So again, your proof point's right on. It is so different than the other one, but it is very similar to the other one. Obviously, it's darker, it's richer, it's almost creamy in the taste, like you would expect from a beer that was made out of that, right? But it also has that fruity floral note that I'm insinuating to the house note that you're talking about, that I went back to the first one, and it has all of that sub the dark creaminess.
All right, I'm going to stop this right there. All right. I know you're listening to the podcast. I know you're just getting in the groove of it, and I'm sorry. But we need to talk about a sponsor. We're not talking about Bad Motivator Barrels, although we love them, right? We're not talking about Z. Smith Whiskey and Mixology. We're not talking about them either. Today we are talking about none other than, focus, Hinterhaus. Yes, Hinterhaus has jumped on board as a sponsor, and I cannot be happier. And I thank Nate and the entire crew over there for taking the chance with us. And I'm gonna do you right. I promise, Nate. So obviously you're watching the podcast right now, so you know you're already interested. We went from talking about Tesla to talking about terroir. How do you do that? It's good conversation with good people, right? And these are good people. They are from Arnold, California. I keep wanting to say Arnold Palmer, which a great drink as well. I'm sure this whiskey would go very well at an Arnold Palmer, but they are from Arnold, and therefore they're having to do things a little differently because they are not in the big cities. You know what I mean? They're trying to get back to the terroir of their area, which is super cool, and I enjoy that. Another cool thing they're doing, they're not just doing, the American single malts and stuff like that. They're doing finished bourbons. And here at the end of this month, the end of November, they are releasing their line called the Warming Hut, which the Warming Hut is a holiday themed liqueur, which you have to understand, not all people want to go and just have whiskey, during the holidays. Some people want to have something with a little bit more spice. Maybe it's a little creamier, stuff like that. A little lower proof even. So they developed this liqueur for the holidays, and we are going to be reviewing that very soon. But for now, I want you to go to hinterhausdistilling.com and sign up for their newsletter at least. Sign up with your email. They're not going to spam you, okay? They told me they weren't going to spam you. And go over there and because they're having new releases that come out all the time, and they do have shipping on their website. So go over to hinterhausdistilling.com right now. You can pause the podcast and go over there and look right now. And it's a beautiful website. I just had it pulled up. And go and get you a bottle. And if you tell them the shaman sent you, they might throw in a sticker. Who knows? Anyway, y'all be good. Be nice to each other and keep your spirits up. Peace.
Which is really cool. I can't wait to sit with. My wife might get on to me for having two Glencairns just sitting there, nosing them. She's like, quit being a nerd, But sit down with both of these and just kind of do a side by side when we're not recording and worried about time and stuff like that. Because I like to do a pretty good sized pour and sit there for like an hour, and just nose it until my nose can't smell anymore and stuff like that. I've talked to a couple of people now that said, and you tell me what you think. I don't know. I'm guessing you do the blending as well. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Myself and my son Keegan. Yeah.
Okay. I've talked to a couple of people who say when they do their blending, they don't actually nose the whiskey. They just drink it and do it off of the palate. It was a strange thing. My buddy up over at Found North Distilling, they're sourcing Canadian whiskey and blending it and doing cool things with that. But he said they didn't nose it. They just tasted it, which I was like, that's really strange, kind of cool, but really strange. Obviously you're going to get retro nasal, right? But how do you not nose it? Like that's just kind of a thing that I do. I nose my water sometimes,
Yeah. No, I love the sense of smell with whiskeys. I like to get a little bit on my hands and dry it, because then I find you get a little bit more of the core of it. So, the actual grain in the barrel smells. And so we like to use that. I would say we definitely nose it when we're selecting single barrels, because one of the big, things about a single barrel is you want it to be the best it can be all around. And if there's something funky or sharp with the nose, we'll generally pass that on to be in a product that's a blend of several barrels. But for single barrels, we want uniqueness, and not in a bad way, hopefully, but but uniqueness. And so these are fun when we're doing the blends on these right now. We're mostly, because of the small nature of what we're doing and because of the experimental nature, we're mostly figuring out what to do with the blends in the barreling and finishing process. So again, that batch 2, a portion of it was put into X bourbon and a portion of it put into X wheat. And there was a reason for that. We thought that distillate needed a little bit from both of those.
That makes sense.
And could make out that way. So it's almost, now that I'm thinking about it, almost like pre-blending a little bit. And hoping that at the end of the day they're going to mature the way you want. But that's fun. And then the other fun thing we're doing that has not come out yet, but that I'm super pumped about, is similar kind of discovery thing, but we're really zeroing in one of the only variables being the grain. So we're doing single grain distillations from single farms, aging them all the same way for the same amount of time. Obviously our open fermentation, we have some variability there. We're going to bottle them all the same. So really the only thing that we are changing is the one grain that's going to be, and it's going to be a singular expression per bottle of a single farm, single grain, all aged in X bourbon barrels. So that will be, that'll be super fun. I'm super pumped about that, just because it really highlights the difference between an individual grain from one to the other.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that is super cool, because then you can say, hey, this is what, regular two-row tastes like. This is what the Carapils taste like, and I mean, there's so many varieties. You could do that till the end of days and have bottles to put out. So let's talk a little bit about the name Hinterhaus, which you told me earlier that some people call it house, which, being from a German community, we say HAUS. But tell us a little bit about the name and the brand and stuff like that before we get on to the next one.
Yeah, for sure. So, Hinterhaus, we're deeply inspired with what we do by the Alpine region of Europe. So, you think of the Italian Alps, the French Alps, like all that area, they have an amazing culture of distillation, but they also have an amazing culture of, the ski culture, the mountain culture, the chalets, all of that sort of fun stuff. We're very into that whole thing. So when we started our distillery, we're in this mountain town. It's a vacation community in Arnold, California, about 4,000 feet elevation in the Sierra Mountains. And most of the town is filled with, vacation cabins that were built in the 1960s. So think a lot of A-frames and tall trees.
Okay, cool.
And
I like it.
Yeah, all that fun stuff. And we knew we weren't creating a distillery based on heritage. As far as we know, we don't have any, deep roots in the South of moonshining or anything like that. So, wagon wheels and that kind of stuff didn't really appeal to what we were trying to build. And so we went with more of a modern take on distilling, and kind of leaned it into us being in the California Alps. And Hinterhaus, it means, the literal translation is a house in the back. So it can be a mother-in-law cabin or, something like that. And this whole thing really hit high gear on a trip to Germany, where my brother and his family live. They live in Berlin. And we were tooling around town in the evening and had just had dinner. And over there in Berlin, anyways, I'm sure many of the European cities, the wine stores have almost like a seating area where you can sit down and have a snack and buy a bottle of wine and share it.
Right.
So we were in one of those, kind of a wine shop, and they had a small section of distilled spirits. And of course, me being a spirits fan, I find myself in front of that little section, and there was a spirit there called a Kräuterlikör, or Kräuterlikör, and it's like 23 herbs and botanicals and traditional and blah blah blah. And I thought, I'm going to buy that. So we went home, after having the wine and a nice dinner, and decided to taste it. And by the end of the evening, we had finished that bottle. I think probably mostly myself and my brother, but the wives were involved a little bit, but they probably, pieced out and saw the writing on the wall.
They did not.
Yeah. And so when I got back home to Arnold, I just became obsessed with what is this thing? How is it made? And again, going down the rabbit hole and kind of this journey of discovery. And I'm a very curious person. Started trying to make it myself, just using, vodka from the store and macerating botanicals. And did that for a couple of years. And that really led into this rabbit hole of trying to figure out distilling. What's it about? How are these things made? So some of the Hinterhaus name is a little bit of a nod back to where the rabbit hole started in Berlin and Germany.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And today we do have that product. We called it Anorak. And it does really well. It's 23 herbs and botanicals. It's aged in a Solera aging process in ex-bourbon barrels. We sweeten it with agave syrup because we're in California. That makes sense. And it's been surprisingly popular for a very niche, unknown product. A lot of people in the States have not tried something like that. So
what botanicals? I mean, if you can disclose, what types of botanicals? Is it more gin-like or is it more absinthe-like? What is?
It's heavier. So there are two big Kräuterlikör brands in the United States that people might be familiar with for a marker. So one is Underberg. So they're the little bottles in paper it's a very bitter herbal liqueur. And the other is Jägermeister. That's technically a Kräuterlikör. So, it's very creative though, but you're talking strong flavors. And then it's up to the distillery to choose what they're highlighting. And Jäger is a mass market, expression of it. Much more on the syrupy side, a lot of licorice and star anise. Underberg is on the bitter side, not syrupy, not sweet. So you have this range of things you can do, but it's dark. It's got a lot of, ours is heavy orange peel, heavy cinnamon. Those flavors are up front. And we typically tell bourbon lovers, just put a splash of it in your bourbon over ice, and it's fabulous. A lot of the baking spices kind of come through, and it adds a touch of sweetness from that agave syrup.
You use it like bitters, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So that's kind of what we're doing there. And as you said, we've got a bunch of product lines. We almost have like 3 different verticals. One is I would call it the more grain to glass. American single malt whiskey is very much a focus. Another vertical is we work with a lot of wine. So we do a lot of spirits that are wine based. So we make vodka, gin, and liqueurs that start life as wine. We're in California, talking about terroir. Wine is a natural resource that exists around us. So that's kind of the other vertical, is working with wine-based spirits. And then the third is almost like, people will say independent bottling, but is sourcing interesting bourbons and finishing them in local wine barrels. And that's kind of the third vertical that we have. So it's almost like running 3 different distilleries in one facility. It's all under the same brand, but it's, they're drastically different approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that caveats us to our third guy, and this is the one that got me interested in your brand. I saw it, and I will tell you, as somebody who's trying to promote your brand, those paid sponsorships on Instagram work, because I saw it, and I now we're sitting here together. So
Cool.
Kudos to that. So I picked up a bottle of the Calaveras. Am I saying that right? Cast strength single barrel reserve. But you were gracious enough to send me over another batch, but it's a totally different batch from a totally different distillery from a totally different state. So what I would like to do, and if you don't have both of these side by side, I get it. I would like to do a little side by side again of these two and kind of critique. I've been sipping on the one that I have for a little bit and enjoying it very much. Yes. Enjoying it very much. It has a lot of really dark wine note flavors, which I love. I love a good finished bourbon. I know that's bourbon lovers are going to hate me for it, but I don't care. And so I'm interested to see if the different distillate makes a difference in the flavor profile, which I'm sure it will. So tell us a little bit
I don't know if
people
probably can't see the color very well, but
super dark.
It's dark, and it's got this really strong kind of red tint to it, and that's from the wine barrel finishing. So the story on this one, and I'm gonna go even a different route. I'm drinking batch 13 single barrel, which I'll tell you about, and it's been long sold out, but I'll tell you about it, and you'll be envious because it's really interesting, but it ties into what we're doing here. So we are spirits fans in the first, place, whiskey nerds, both my wife and I. And when we started the distillery, we made this decision that American single malt whiskey was the thing we were going to really be passionate about making from grain to glass. And there's reasons that we bought certain equipment to do American single malt whiskey in a particular way that doesn't lend itself to us making our own bourbon. And so what we decided, but we love bourbon. And what we decided to do was, hey, if we're distillers, that gives us access to other distilleries. So if we were, we're bourbon geeks, like I said, so we said, let's go out and find interesting bourbons from distilleries we know or distilleries we don't know. And let's bring those in-house, work with them, and finish them in local wine barrels. Now, when we say local, we're talking, we have 20-something wineries within 30-minute drive from us.
So do I where I'm at. So
yeah. So the advantage there is, and again, tying into that why it's so dark, is we'll be on their schedule and they'll say, hey, Nate, we've got 12 Barbera casks that we're going to dump next Tuesday. Do you want them? And I'll say, yes, I'll take them. And we'll be down there when they dump them, drive them up to the distillery, and transfer the bourbon in them the same day or the next day at the latest.
Wow.
So these things are fresh.
As wet as you can get.
Yeah. And that's where you get that character from. They haven't sat in a shipping container. They've still got all that fruitiness, and they haven't been cleaned, or a lot of wineries love to clean their barrels when they're done with them and steam them and stuff like that. And I just say, no, just don't touch them. Kind of freaks them out a little bit.
Right.
I'm like, just empty them, put the bung back in, and we'll come get them. So
yeah. No. Okay. So the one that I was sipping on first is and if you can, this one is the distilled in Kentucky, the batch 18. And this one is at cask strength, I'm guessing, 119 proof. So we jumped up in proof a little bit, jumped up in flavor a lot, and now we're into independent bottling. So it's really cool. Like you're saying, it's like almost like a totally different company, but it's the same company. So it's cool. You get to do cool stuff with other people's whiskey too. So that's kind of cool.
Well, and there are, as you know, and us being whiskey people, there's some amazing juice being made all over this country.
Absolutely.
And so this one, what we try to do is we'll try to get barrels from folks we really want to work with, that we respect what they're doing and they're making good stuff, or it's interesting or whatever it is. But we don't want the standard mash bill necessarily. We want to try to get our hands on something like, "Ooh, I didn't even know you guys made that mash bill," or whatever, some sort of weird happy accident they made. So in this case, it's from Bardstown, Kentucky. This barrel,
cool.
70 corn, 22 wheat, 8% malted barley.
What?
So just kind of an off the wall, different kind of a thing. We're about 3.5 years, and then the wine finishing is fascinating too, and we're learning so much about how to pair wine flavors with certain distillates. Because we're not just doing red wine barrel finishes, right? We're doing varietals. So in this case, we've done now 13 or 14 different varietals of wine we've worked with. When I started this, I didn't even know there were 13 or 14 different varietals. But this one is a Tanat barrel, which is a rare kind of red wine that's mostly used in red wine blends. But in this case, we got a barrel of it, and we were like, let's do a single barrel finish in this Tanat wine. The other one you have, the batch 15, is a Barbera wine finish. That's almost a 6-year-old single barrel. And a high malted barley content and a good wheat content on that. But Barbera is a great, one of my favorite red wines, and it grows really well in our region. So again, leaning into what we have here, we happen to have a lot of great fresh Barbera wine casks available to us.
That's awesome. And I will tell you guys, like, just nosing both of these side by side, obviously different wines are going to taste different, even though I can't taste the difference. One tastes like wine, one tastes like not wine, but they smell so different, and the flavors, and I know it's different distillate as well, so that does but and of course I have a fresh cracked bottle opposed to a half drunk as well, so there is some oxidation in the other one as well. Not as much as people think. I think it's like a 1% oxidation rate until you get down to like 3 or 4 ounces in the bottle, then it oxidizes a lot more. But it is so rich and fruity. I mean, it is fruit, it's like grape Kool-Aid almost at one point. But yet the proof being at a higher proof, 119, 118, these guys don't punch that high. They punch a lower in the palate than they should, which is really cool. And I think it's that wine finish kind of just curving those edges off and making it way more approachable, which I love.
That, and then our single barrel program is really, so our standard bourbon is 92 proof. It's a blend of a handful of barrels. Again, we're doing really small batch stuff here. And the single barrel program is really all about, and always will be about, barrels that we taste through when we're doing our blending, that we think are special for one reason or another. So it's not that we're creating barrels, or we're, we've got this program and we have to allocate so many barrels. A barrel only gets to be a single barrel if we, meaning my son and I and my wife and his fiance, think that if somebody is passionate in that group enough to convince us all that needs to be a single barrel, then it goes into the program. And what that means is we have now finished the aging process. It's been in a finishing barrel. The other ones are getting blended into our standard bourbon product at 92 proof. And the single barrel one's going to stay in the finishing barrel for longer. So in some of these cases, we're getting over a year in the wine barrel.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Finishing. So it's really getting extra age, extra character. And one of the reasons you're getting that doesn't punch at 119 and 117 is because we've tasted through these barrels and we're like, these are phenomenal ones. We love this,
absolutely.
you know?
Yeah.
And so that's really the fun part of being, you know, putting our whiskey nerd hat on, is we get to do those things. We get to buy barrels and taste through them and choose ones that we think are special. I mean, what a cool job. Like,
Yeah. Oh, I mean, here's the thing. I was listening to another whiskey podcast earlier today, which, you know, I have to do my research so that I can, you know, present a good product. And they were talking about a big conglomerate brand that just sold out to another big brand. And they were talking about finding good barrels and having access to good barrels, not just new barrels, right? Not just barrels you want to age your product in, but finding good product. If you wanted to do like a you know, like you're doing with this other one, with this wine finished, like once you get established in the community, a lot more opens up to you and it makes it more fun. Whereas in the past, you know, MGP is always going to give you whiskey, right? They'll sell whiskey to anybody. They'll sell barrels to me if they, you know, if I can afford them, right? That's not the problem, but it's finding the good whiskey. You know, yeah, I can get a 3-year-old barrel right now, but it's finding the good stuff. What about that one in the back? You know, and we were, I was talking to a lady on the podcast, and she would go in the barrel warehouse and hand pick her own barrel. And she's like, I want that one. Well, that one's not ready yet. Well, that's the one I want. I want this one. So that's you kind of you're able to be a little bit more picky when you bought a number of barrels. So kind of go through that little barrel buying part. Do they send you samples? Do you actually go and try them in the warehouse? How does that go, if you have the
usually
time?
So when we started, obviously during COVID, it was like, as during COVID and as a new distiller who nobody knew who the heck we were, really the only option for us was MGP. So we started with MGP 45 wheat, because we love wheated bourbons.
Yes.
And then doing the barrel finishing. And slowly we were able to build connections and contacts and convince people that what we were doing, we weren't going to, you know, bastardize their whiskey and it was going to be okay. So now the way the process is we really do reach out to folks that we've either tried their stuff or we've heard about them, or we want to work with them, or we're big fans of what they're doing. And the conversation usually starts as, you know, them saying, yeah, how many do you want? 500, 1,000? And we're like, no.
Let's start with 2.
But what I'll say is I want to know the stuff that you have, that you did, that is not out there readily available, or you did this weird project for somebody and it fell through, and so you've got a dozen barrels laying around and nobody knows what to do with. Because I want to know what else you can make. You make phenomenal stuff, but I want to taste some stuff you've done that I can't just find from somebody else who's bottled it. So the one I'm drinking is one of my favorites we've worked with so far. It's from Bardstown, Kentucky.
Okay.
It's about 4.5 years old. It's got 12% malted barley, 35% wheat, and then 26.5% yellow corn and 26.5% bloody butcher corn.
Shut up.
Yeah, and then we finished that in a let's see, where am I at? A petite Syrah barrel, and served it up at cask strength. And it's just so fun because I haven't seen them release this mash bill.
No, never heard of it.
We didn't get very much of it, and they didn't have very much of it. And so it's just things like that are like really fun. And so that's what we're trying to do. So you mentioned MGP, and we were able a couple of years ago to do a similar thing with them and purchase some very interesting mash bills they did that, to my knowledge, has not made it into a product and publicly published what that mash bill is. I'm sure it's made it into products somewhere, But we've got some really fun ones coming up. We've got a 51% corn, 49% rye that they did. We've got a 51 corn, 49 malted barley that they did.
Love that.
So again, like, they make good stuff. There's a reason that they're in a bunch of bottles. But we're like, I want to know the stuff that you did that didn't reach mass market, or like I said,
Right.
a contract fell through, or whatever it is that you've got these interesting things. So we're just making ourselves, working our way around and just being like you would of, I want to try that. Wow, that's crazy. Let's do it. So it's really fun.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, so I got a couple more questions. I forgot to ask you beforehand. I don't want to keep you all night. I know you're on the West Coast, and I don't want to keep you all night. But if you like, let's talk about your personal preferences. If you're not drinking your own whiskey that you've made or you've produced, what whiskey are you drinking?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we don't drink much of our own stuff except, trials at work and stuff like that. Mainly because we do like to get out there and support other folks and try different things. And I do think you can get sort of a bias on your palate for your own stuff.
Yes, sir.
So there are so many. So if we start with American single malt whiskey, we're good friends and big fans of some of the stuff that Stranahan's is doing, especially the stuff you can get at the distillery. I've got a tea barrel finished, like a black tea barrel finished single malt over there that's phenomenal. You could go all day long on the American single malt front. There's so many, Cedar Ridge, and so many people doing incredible stuff. I like a smoky Scotch. One of my favorites is Port Askeg. They have a 110 proof presentation of their Scotch, which is really smoky. I like that. We're big fans of Balcones and any of the really funky stuff they do. The weirder and stronger and more funky taste in the better. So we try a lot of stuff. We're, like I said, our whole family are spirits fans. So Texas Sodal, you guys have some Sodal being made out there that's amazing. Yeah, man, I could keep going.
Okay. So you're just a connoisseur. We'll say that you're a connoisseur of all things spirits.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Awesome. That's what I like to hear, because there's some people that are like, I just want to have a beer, which I'm sure you want to have a beer every once in a while as well. So especially now that we're getting into the cooler weather, a nice porter or a stout or something, it goes down pretty good.
Don't get me wrong. A High Life during the football game is my go-to for sure.
Okay. I mean, we gotta do our thing. So, what about some of your Pacific Northwest guys, like Westland, Westward, all those guys? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Copperworks up there.
Copperworks. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of it, I mean, there's amazing stuff going on, and it's really cool because it kind of drives you to be as good as you can be. Because there is really high quality stuff happening in spirits in this country. Yes. And so it's just, you see somebody else doing something, or you taste something that they've done. Some of like Breckenridge did an amazing port finished bourbon this year, or last year, maybe it was, that just, blows your mind, and you go, wow, we could do better, or, whatever. So it's really fun. And at the same time, it's a great community because people are not, super competitive or guarding secrets. I find the distilled spirit space is very welcoming, and full of a bunch of very genuine people. So Pacific Northwest. Here in California, we've got a bunch of great stuff going on. Pacific Coast is doing cool stuff. St. George, of course, has been around
St. George,
for a long time doing cool stuff. I can't name them all. There's so many cool things happening and new ones popping up every day that have had the same dream we've got. We've only been at it for a few years here, and new people coming in doing cool stuff and just making amazing things. So I think one of the big things for me will be when we start to see the liquor store shelves start to really change. I know you're in Texas, so I'm sure you see a good amount of Texas whiskey on the shelf.
Yes.
But the rest of the country, it's still pretty dominated by the big brands, and people are chasing the big brands. They're not really chasing the small stuff yet, and they really should be. So, it's the same thing when beer kind of changed over. At one point, the stores started to catch on that people really wanted local, and they wanted craft, and they wanted new flavors. Now you go to the liquor store and the beer section is off the charts. So what's there?
Yes.
So it'll be fun to see when it starts to change a little bit, and you start to see more interesting things ending up on the shelf, rather than just allocations, which are phenomenal bottles, but allocations from some of the big guys being the things people chase. It'd be cool that if somebody, if everybody was like, hey, this month we're going to go find, some Copperworks stuff, or we're going to go find some Balcones stuff. And I've said this here for a while now, but now it's really important, is if you don't support your local craft brewer, distiller, winery, restaurant, marketplace, whatever it is, at this point in time, you're going to lose them.
Absolutely. I mean, the truer words could never have been spoken, because I am a craft lover, obviously. I love everything that anybody who is doing cool stuff, right? You're doing cool stuff, I want to talk to you. But at the same time, it's like keeping it, I don't know how to say it, keeping it small enough to where you still have the heart, but not so small to where, oh, we made 2 bottles today or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing it in the shed in the back, right? We're actually a functioning distillery or whatever, but also keeping it to where, because I know, Stranahan's is really big. They're a big place. Balcones is a big place, but they're still innovating and they're still doing things that people are like, holy crap, I didn't know you could do that with whiskey.
They've still got that spirit.
Yeah. And we're getting to the time of year where people start reflecting on the year, right? By the time this episode comes out, we'll be getting into the holidays. I forgot to tell you that earlier, but we'll be getting into the holidays. So what do you do? And this can be my last question if you need to go. What do you do for like a holiday kind of celebration with the family? Is there a specific cocktail you go to? Because I'm trying to build up a cocktail list, right, of holiday cocktails. And is there a specific cocktail you go to, whiskey based or not? I don't care. That you're just like, man, this one slaps. I've got to do it. In-laws are coming into town. I don't know if I can deal with it. They're staying in my spare bedroom in my Hinterhaus. They're staying there. How do you get through the holidays? Let's say that.
So so there's 2 things I'll mention there. One is we used to live in San Jose, which is a very Mediterranean climate, and we had an orange tree in our backyard. And around the holidays, they would be nice and ripe. So we would do, just very spoiled California style. We would do just mimosas with the fresh oranges, and it's San Jose. It's probably 75 degrees and sunny, and you're sitting out on Thanksgiving having a mimosa. It's like, this is okay.
That's not a horrible life.
Yeah, so we would do that. That was always sort of our go-to and tradition. Now that we're up in the mountains and it's colder and things, we actually created a spirit that we released the day after Thanksgiving called Warming Hut, which is a reference to these huts throughout the Alps that people could warm themselves if they were on like a snowshoe hike or cross-country skiing or something like that. And it's a blend of port wine, bourbon, local honey with flavors of chocolate and whipped cream. So that's been our,
What are you doing?
Yeah, that's been
that sounds amazing.
That's been our stocking stuffer Christmas morning sort of sipping cordial, and it tastes like a chocolate cordial with bourbon in it.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
It's a fun kind of creative dessert thing, and it's gotten a lot of attention, and more importantly, what was unanticipated, but we're really thankful for, is it's become a tradition for other families, and
Okay.
that is a very special place to be, in that you
Absolutely.
created a product that folks share every year, and
Yes.
and that's not something we set out to do necessarily. It's more of a dream come true kind of a thing, and
Right.
so that's a very fun special thing that we release,
Yeah.
only in
Sounds like it.
California right now, but hopefully we'll figure out a way to smuggle you a few bottles.
Because I mean, let me tell you this. I mean, it doesn't get super cold here in Texas, but I tell you what, sitting on the front porch in the morning, having a Christmas morning, having a little bit of warming hut, yeah, I could do that. I could do that pretty easily. So my go-to holiday cocktail, not that you were asking, but I will
No, I want to
tell
know
you
though.
anyway. Besides an old fashioned, which we all love an old fashioned, right? I really like to do. Uh, I call it a whiskey sour inverted. So instead of doing the egg, the egg foam and all the stuff with the whiskey sour, I put a little bit of orange juice in it. And so I make the whiskey sour, but it's kind of like an orange juicy cocktail. And you have it right at about lunchtime, right? You don't have it early in the morning because it is a boozy cocktail. You have
Yeah,
it about lunchtime, right before you're fixing to take your nap,
yeah.
and then you have a good nap, and then you get into the good stuff. But that's mine. I don't know what it's called. It's basically whiskey, a bunch of Peychaud's bitters, and orange juice. So whatever you call
That
that. But
sounds phenomenal. I
yeah,
think I'll have
no,
to try that this year.
it's it's really good, but it's the orange juice is kind of a pick me up. Some people can't do juices, and I get that. Um, but the orange juice is kind of a pick me up, and I prefer to use like a really either a really easy single malt or a weeded bourbon. I don't use like a high rye bourbon or anything on that. It needs to be a little lighter in its
Yeah.
profile. Maybe even an Irish whiskey would probably be really good in it too. I need to try that again. I have tried it with like whipped cream and stuff, but Doc says lay off the whipped cream. So, got to do it. Got to do what Doc says. So, okay. Was there anything else we needed to talk about before we go? It has been a blast talking to you. I
Thank you.
can't thank you enough for coming on here. Your whiskeys, not only the ones you make, but the ones that you are finishing and doing cool stuff with, are all amazing. Like I'm going to send out some sample packs to some people that I know will thoroughly enjoy them, and they are not shy to critique if they suck, but I can guarantee you they're not going to critique it in a bad way. So what else was there? There was something else I was going to ask you real fast, but
Well, I just want
that's
to
it.
say, yeah, thank you for what you're doing and for your interest in what we're doing. And I tell people all the time in the tasting room when I'm able to head out there, they'll say things like, "Well, I don't want to offend you," or "I hope that this or that or whatever,"
Yeah.
I'll always say, like, everybody's smell and taste are different, and
Yep.
you're not going to like everything, and I'm not going to like everything. And there are single barrels that I wouldn't have chosen for single barrels, but
Right.
somebody on our team fought hard for it and believed in it.
Right.
And so, if somebody has critiques or doesn't like it or it's not their jam, that's more than okay. Like, but
Right.
there's so many
Absolutely.
flavors and people in the world. That's what it's really about. And again, to your point earlier of supporting your local folks, is that they probably tried really hard, and they probably have all of the right reasons for doing what they're doing, and we should
Yes.
support that effort.
Yes.
Um,
Absolutely.
the vast majority of craft distillers, brewers, wineries, shops, whatever it is,
Yeah.
are trying to do really cool stuff. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love it, and I will. You're part of the family now. So I'm going to support you as much as I can with everything that I do. It's been a blast, and this is a little housekeeping, so just hold on for a second. All of you who are listening and watching this, make sure that you follow, like, subscribe, and everything that I'm doing. I will have all of Hinterhaus's information down below. You can go pick up barrels. You can not barrels, bottles. If you want a single barrel, they might sell you a single barrel too. Who knows? But go try their stuff. It's amazing. And y'all be good. Be nice to each other. Come on. It's the holiday season. Y'all need to be nice. And until next time, keep your spirits up.